Wicked. Brrr. Mr. Roman Albert, how are you, brother?
I'm good, Chief. How you doing?
Excellent, man. Excellent. It's a celebration.
It should be. It's your birthday.
Yeah, it is, man. Well, every day is a bit of a celebration. Every day I'm alive, I kind of wake up going, God damn, like how good is this shit?
It's
How good
true.
is this to get another opportunity to go it again? Because where the hell do we go when we sleep? Like, what the fuck?
It's a thing, man. Like every day is a birthday in a sense, but I feel no matter how existential I try to get, you can't shake those like inbuilt rituals, man. Like the birthday comes around, you're still waiting for that midnight countdown. Like, ooh, the notifications are gonna start popping off. It is a thing.
So when's your birthday?
My birthday is May, 22nd of May.
Okay. What is that? Is that like the bull? Is that where the bull comes from?
I'm I'm split, Gemini Taurus.
Yeah. Wicked, man. Wicked. And the bullhorn. That's a big thing. That's been a big part of your life for what? What are we now? Like 8
At
years? Not coming
least.
up 9 years now?
Oh, not that far. I think probably maybe 7, 8 years.
Yeah.
2013, I
2011
think
was the
was the
first,
first
was
gig.
it? Or
No, like 2012.
okay.
2012, I met the guys, and then 2013 was the first gig. The start of 2013. So it's been like 5 years, getting into 6 years.
Nice,
It's
man.
uh,
How'd
it's a
that all
blur.
adventure? Tell us how you met. What did you meet? Who did you meet? How did that all happen?
So the Bullhorn journey started. For those that don't know Bullhorn, it's a big like 9-piece brass band. Not in the style of like New Orleans brass bands, but just that many horns, a drummer, and then myself doing some MC freestyle shenanigans. I met the guys initially. I was just hosting an event, and it was one of those moments where, in hindsight, you can see it's a major turning point. At the time, it was just another gig. I was hosting a kind of not battle of the bands. It was like a collab of the bands. So it was this group, Grimtilla and the Diablo, still one of my favorite acts. I hope they do a reunion gig
Grimtilla.
at some point. Yeah, man, Grimtilla and the Diablo. It was that Grimtilla voodoo craziness with just really. I don't know if I'm meant to swear or try to abstain from
Nah,
swearing, but
it's all. I'm pretty sure every single episode has the explicit warning. So
okay, well they're just
we're good.
motherfucker players all day, just crazy good players, and they were hosting like a double bill at Island Vibe Festival, which I think you know about. And
Yeah, one of the
Island Vibe
best.
Festivals is one of the best. It's probably up there in my top three. Stradbroke Island, the great tunes, the people are just awesome, so you can't go wrong. In that, they were doing a bill with Bullhorn, who was instrumental at the time. I was just hosting, and Bullhorn actually had a couple of guest MCs that were like programmed to jump up, and I was just there as that general MC hype man host. And as it goes, I'm doing the stage manager thing, trying to like stay humble, like enjoying the fact that I don't have to actually perform. And I'm just like going backstage, like, hey guys, so you'll be up in a couple of minutes. Hope you're ready. Get sweet. Take out the guys. I think it was Kalski and another MC. I forget his name now, but they rocked it. They did well. And of course, the guys from Bullhorn, or the MCs at least, knew that I freestyled because that was during my first band project, which did just like live improvised residency gigs in Brisbane.
Mm.
And they were like, man, you want to jump up and just do a verse real quick? And it was that moment where initially I was like, no, it's okay. You guys go ahead, please. Like, I insist, this is for, this isn't where I'm meant to perform. And then there was that little voice in me that was like, this is false humility. Don't like shun an opportunity to get down just because you're trying to like, no, come on. It's not about. So I went, fuck it. Yeah, sure. Let me jump on in there. And to be honest, I had previously only jammed with like kind of live band, Jay Dilla, jazz hop, kind of a little bit more chilled out, a little bit more artsy. It went a little extreme, but not anything like a brass band. And I just caught the hype. And I'm sure you've felt that like in that improvisation space where there's the right crowd or the right band atmosphere, that adrenaline surge, you just kind of
Oh
go to this
man,
different level.
man, even just thinking about it, my heart rate's rising. I've got chills on my skin just thinking about it.
About to have that cipher. It's going down. But yeah, and that was it. The second I started the verse, I kind of remember rapping in a style I hadn't previously kind of rapped in, but it just, my mind went, what is appropriate for the vibe? And I just fucking jumped on top. And the second I started, I kind of looked over to the band, and I remember the trombones looking through the bone like, yeah, man. Like, it was just this this moment of like, at last, yeah. So I got the call, I think the week after I got the call from Stevie, who
So they tracked down your number and stuff. They tracked you down.
Yeah, it was like that one night stand that was just too good. They had to hit me back.
You gave him that good dick.
Yeah, I've been giving it to them ever since.
That shit, you were locked in after that, bro.
It was good. Yeah, it was just that simple call of like, hey man, let's keep doing whatever that was. And I was like, yeah man, I'm down for that. And it's just been a beautiful journey.
So just to tell the people who never have seen you guys live or heard you guys' music, just give them a bit of a rundown, because there's, like how much is improvised, how much is like, is it planned improvisation, how much is pre?
Sure.
Talk to us a little bit about that.
With Bullhorn, the songs are charted. So the songs are all done to chart. It's like orchestrated material, but within the form that is set, I'm freestyling the content maybe about, I'd say 75%, 70%. Whenever we're dropping a track that has been recorded or like on a previous album, especially if we're playing a show that has like fans in the house that want to like hear the song that they recognize, I'll do the written from that track. But if we're playing to a new audience, sometimes I'll just like troll the band and I'll just do a freestyle version of the song, and they're like, "What are you? Oh, okay." just
like you're like, it's 16, it's 24, it works.
Exactly, as long as it's kind of, I think of like a horse in a stable. Like there's the stable of the form, but I'm bucking around like full rodeo, just taking it anywhere that it hasn't been sometimes, just to keep it interesting, you know.
No doubt. And what's your background? When did you get into freestyling? When did you get into rapping? Are you into hip hop at all? Like, what's your background in terms of the culture and all that?
This is where we can go down a potential existential rabbit hole, because
perfect. This is the right place to do it. We're living life in the flow zone, bro.
That's it. I think I have a somewhat different experience of how I got into being an MC at the front of a band than potentially other hip-hop artists, in the sense that I didn't actually grow up in the culture, and that was like all the way up into my teenage years. I was not a hip-hopper. I think as like a large dark-skinned dude, everyone's like, oh yeah, he must be hip-hop. You just kind of get this like reverse kind of cultural prejudice in your favor, so to speak, and you're
like, oh yeah, that's Fat Joe.
Yeah. Everyone's like, man, you sound like this artist that I've never heard of with a bit of this artist I've never heard of. I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm going for. Thank you. Yes. No,
you're like, are they dope? Are they any good? You're like, all right, that's me. That's
that's it. It's so basically, I started getting into hip hop in my like final years of high school, and it's a bit of a journey. But in like over the years of high school, I kind of fell into Christianity and the whole church, Pentecostal, super like.
Around the same time that you get into hip hop.
A couple of years before it started, like the spiritual aspect kicked in. The like, you know, I went to church and got saved and just went full like fanatical Christian. And then
did you get baptized and everything? And
man, I did the whole thing, like the whole baptism.
Tell us a little bit about. Let's just hold up for a second. Let's elaborate and unfurl that a little bit.
Sure.
What was happening up until then? Were you like a bad boy before then, or like what got you into that kind of thing?
So basically, how it was is my whole family, my parents migrated from a little island country called Seychelles. Back in 1989, they moved to Australia to have me and give me the chance for a better life. As well as my sister, who was already born, and my sister to come a few years later. But essentially, we were raised by parents that had come from that kind of Catholic childhood raising, and they rebelled against that Catholicism that they kind of were raised in, that they saw as a sort of broken system and as a human system. Not to offend anyone who might be Catholic now, but that was their experience. And they came to Australia, raised us in a household that I can only kind of describe as a very intellectually atheistic household, and not too strict in their atheism. You know, there's that whole brand of atheism that kind of gets likened to that extreme veganism. Like, how do you know an atheist? They'll tell you, that kind of thing. It wasn't like that. It was just, we were the only kids in our primary school that were pulled out of religious education. And there was this deep sense of, hey, all that human stuff is bullshit. You just be curious and you be open, and, you know, life will find its way. So that was how I got raised up. Come high school, my parents went through a separation, a divorce, and my oldest sister was having some mental health kind of battles. And in that time, somewhere in the timeline post-divorce, we were visiting some family that were like our kind of Christian associated. You know, everyone has that like Christian or religious extension of the family, that family that you visit one weekend and you just feel guilty the whole time you're there, and the kids don't eat sugar.
They're a little bit strange.
Yeah, or it feels like they're a bit strange, or they're just so nice that you just feel like an absolutely shit human being just for being in their presence. And they're like, "What are you eating?" And you're like, "I'm eating corporate candy with a label." Oh, like it feels like a whole different world. But we were visiting that family, and this particular weekend when we were
that was in Australia or in the Seychelles?
This was in Australia, so this is all the ones who made it out. It's like everyone who made it over. And basically, post-divorce, my mom's rigid atheism was kind of a bit more agnostic. And that family, that particular weekend, invited us to church.
So what's the difference? What's the difference between atheism and agnosticism?
Well, basically, I found this out a couple of years back. Agnostic is more of an adjective. Linguistically, it's an adjective. So you can be an agnostic Christian or an agnostic atheist. So agnostic is kind of like add a dash of uncertainty, essentially. So an agnostic...
It's a little bit of, well, we don't really know. This is what we believe, but we don't 100% know.
It's pretty much that. So an agnostic Christian is someone who says, I'm pretty sure there's like, there must be a God. I believe in all the teachings, but who can really know for sure? And an agnostic atheist says, look, I have no proof that there's no God, but it seems pretty probable that all this religious stuff is not real. And it's agnostic in its certainty, but it's kind of still in that position. Anyway, my mom.
So it essentially means if you're agnostic, it's a bit of like you're sitting on the fence.
Exactly. It's like sitting on the fence. Even if you have a bit of a position, you're kind of like, you got a little doozy in the chamber. You might pull out at any time if you have different evidence present itself.
Yeah. Cool.
But anyway, the journey is simple. We went to church that weekend. Family members got saved, caught up in the vibe. Not myself, but after a few more months, I was a bit like, where are you guys going every Sunday? I want to be a part of it. And I just kind of started. I'm at home eating cookies. Yeah. I'm like in my early teens. I'm becoming existentially woke without even realizing it. I'm starting to question society. And then all of a sudden there's these Sunday gatherings that just talk a lot about that little area of life that gets left out of school completely, that whole how to live area. And
what was going on for you, like just in terms of culturally, and like what was happening? Was this around the time of internet coming out? Like what was going on at this time?
I remember MSN chat. So internet was definitely becoming a thing. It wasn't like as pervasive and saturated as it is today, of course, but it was a bit of a thing, but it still was.
Mobile phones, kind of Nokia 5110, 3210 days.
Yeah, that whole era. And I mean, we came up in that migrant vibe, so we were getting the hand-me-downs from the hand-me-downs, so it's like we weren't too quick on the innovation curve. We weren't too early. But it was enough to still appreciate the human interaction in like a community, like a church setting kind of brings. So I was just going there for a while. And then at some point there came a time where I just kind of became a bit more embracive of it, I guess, belief-wise. I just went, oh shit, this is the thing. This is like not like a nice thing to think about. This is the thing that life is about. And I just went.
So you were sold. You were like, you bought in. You were like, I'm all in. All my chips in.
I remember I felt like Neo woken outside of the Matrix level of like everything was God's creation. I was seeing like reverberating atoms, and I was reading about quantum physics and astrophysics all through the lens of Christianity, and like, whoa, like you out here, you are the nigga, like you are running shit to a T. This is insane. I was like, yeah, it was a very strange thing.
Made all of this shit.
Yeah, in hindsight, it's a very strange collective delusion sort of way to think. But at the time, it was almost like a very poetic and beautiful, romantic way to become aware of existence on a greater scale, which I think a lot of people...
Was there carry on? A
I
lot
was
of
just
people.
going to say, I think a lot of people sometimes, or a lot of people can come late to that discovery, or not even discovery, but acknowledgement or awareness or consciousness, if you will, of how epic and mysteriously great the universe is and our state of existence in it. Because
By
there's that
late,
little
you
bit
mean
of,
like as in like when it's too late? Like.
I just mean, you know, I'll meet a 40-year-old, like that
Mm-mm.
atypical businessman out of Eagle Street, Brisbane, or like be at a party and you just talk to someone and you can sense that their world bubble is very in their immediate sensory world. And there's no, they haven't kind of journeyed into that abyss. They haven't thrown themselves into the abyss of wonder and found that featherbed or whatever the different philosophers have spoken about it. They're just kind of talking about brands and the new thing that they bought like it's actually a thing, like it actually changes their identity or adds value to their place in the universe. And I'm there going like, yeah, awesome, man, that's cool. But then I'm like, man, like you've like that's 40 years of your life that you've just not actually felt that awe that you kind of have to embrace the discomfort first to arrive at. You know, like it's just a, I mean, and that's just the condition of humanity. It's not, you know, it's not saying that to be more conscious is better, but I just feel like it's like, wouldn't you want to feel this insane, like 24/7 accessible, it's like an adrenaline hit that you can just tap into with just a bit of focus.
Exactly. And the big one that does for me is like the breath, just one little, just recognizing the fact you're breathing. And then as soon as you tune into it, just having that little bit of a, like a little bit more hard breathing, as Goenka would call it, the Vipassana, you know, hard breathing, just to notice that you're breathing and you can feel the aliveness. You can feel it filling up the back of your brain and you're down to your toes and whatever, like you can actually feel it. So even that, just being aware of the breath, I find is huge, a huge like access point for exactly what you're talking about.
Access point. I think that is a good way to think about it. Mine is always the stars. That's been mine. I've just recently gotten more into mindfulness and like starting to think about coming to myself a bit more. But otherwise, my access point has always kind of been when I go outside.
Well,
Literally,
supposedly we're all made from that stuff, so.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe it's the old call home or whatever. But
Is there anything that stands out for you? Like, was there a conversation, a sermon, a passage, a conversation that you had that really stands out and was like, yep, there was a moment where you just went, yep, I'm going all in on this.
I think for me, somewhere between being a kind of follower who was just passively listening and like enjoying, and then feeling this kind of obligation to delve in further myself, and the difference between listening and then I eventually started preaching sermons and taking services and stuff like that. The difference was the notion of I am, which I think is still badass. The Bible no doubt contains a lot of poetic kind of concepts and language, but when there was the Moses, you know, everyone kind of knows that Moses in the burning bush scenario, or if you haven't, watched The Prince of Egypt, because it's still DreamWorks' best musical cartoon. No bias at all. It's next level. Like
Prince of Egypt?
Prince of Egypt, man. There's some other level shit going on that filmmaking scale. It's so impressive. But there's that famous scene where Moses asks God, and I think Exodus or something. He's like, yeah, who are you? And just the fact, I remember listening to a sermon that read out the passage, and God responded, I am. Like, just I am that I am. And I remember that's where the language nerd in me probably clicked in and went, holy shit. So you've got an entity that is so infinite and beyond and bigger and smaller than conceptual capacity of any human, that there's no way to finish that sentence, because the second that had any other word after it, there would be a limitation. And the second I went, oh yeah, because that means God is infinite, and blah, it's like the mathematics of it and the language of it just took me on this like roller coaster of ideological pleasure that just, yeah, I felt like synapses opening up in my mind, and I was like, oh my God, this is the thing.
This is the thing.
It was for some time. Yeah. But
cool, man. Sounds like quite the journey.
It was, man.
And how long did that last? How long were you all in for? And then we were talking about hip hop, like, and how that came about. Like, yeah, how long did that last? And then where did that lead?
Totally. Essentially, that point happened where I kind of went, oh, this is the thing. And I just dug in and I started to go, hey, you know what? Let me start to communicate and learn to communicate as much as I can to spread this gospel, spread this idea, you know? So I was studying film in high school, and I was like, let me study that way. I was starting to preach and I was communicating that way. And I remember initially thinking of hip hop as like literally, I myself as an arrogant young idealist was like, what are the kids listening to? And I was like, oh, it's a tool. Like, let me learn this tool for the spirit, you know? And I kind of started to get into hip hop as a means to, essentially spread the gospel. And I had this powerful message.
So when you say got into hip hop, what? Because this is like what
Sure.
Netscape days. I'm imagining like were you watching videos to read it? How did you get into reading books? Like,
there was this whole chapter of my life in that same time where I remember I think it was through the church network. My sister had met like a partner at the time, and basically we started playing around with like a clothing label just in our own time around this like. I mean, I won't mention the name because I don't know if there's any copyright things that I don't know if he kept running with it and if anything's painted to it, but we had this clothing label that was kind of hip hop associated, and somehow at the same time, that was launching around the same time as like Joel Turner and the Beatboxing Alliance kind of blew up a little bit around Australia. And it was like a sponsorship sort of deal where we were like a clothing label / management thing for a tour. And I just kind of ended up, from the little bit of beatboxing that I learned from high school, I just kind of got thrown in amongst these insane beatboxers. And then Joel Turner's associate MC, I think brother and cousin, or the MCs that were on that particular tour. And I just got kind of immersed in that scene, doing a bit of a tour and going, oh, this is totally a thing. And I remember beatboxing for an MC one day. He was like, man, nah, that's good, but I've heard you speak, bro. Like, you should get into rapping, man. It would be sick, man. You'd be dope. And I was like, I'm going to put my testimony into a rap song. And it was this full, like, ideological, fanatical gesture of like, we will take it to hip hop. And that's what got me into it. It's almost been a source of shame for a few years that gave me trauma, because I initially got into hip hop purely in a studio written capacity where I was writing Christian songs, recording, and I basically teed up with these Christian producers from another church. We made a whole hip hop gospel album. And I gotta say, like, all bias and shame and like cringeness aside, some of it was actually decent. The producers were very talented. So we made some things that musically I can enjoy. But basically it got to the end of the album project, and that was when I hit my turning point where I let go of my faith, to put it short. We can unpack that. But I let go of hip hop as a tool for a message because I had no more message. And instead, over that time of trying to use it as a tool, I fell in love with it as a medium. And it ended up being one of the main things that I used to heal myself from that like existential chasm that was left after faith. Yeah.
Definitely talk to us about the unraveling, and big up to whoever that was that said, hey, let's just stop with that. Let's stop with the beatbox nonsense.
Yeah. It's like, you're clearly no Joel Turner. Let it go, son. Yeah, I think
that honesty is so dope, though. That honesty, when people just give you that feedback like that, I feel there's not enough of that. Like, I don't know, in there's this weird paradox, this weird paradigm happens that in Australia, it's just like there's this talk about tall poppy, which is getting less and less these days, but it has been a thing over the past 20 years or so, but less and less as it becomes more kind of Americanized, and people are like, actually, like, supporting each other is actually cool. And everyone can eat, and there's actually quite a large pool out there, even though there's a small amount of people here. Like that happens. Like, we don't want people to shine. We don't want, like, there's this kind of it doesn't really happen. I haven't been into schools too much to know what it's like these days. My kids are in school now, but I know when I was in school, there was this idea of what was it, like a show off, essentially. Like, if you're showing off, that's frowned upon. You know, if you're showing talent and then you're like, you're not, that's like, people want to shut you down. But there's a bit more encouragement these days, I find, just in general, like in my age bracket at least, or in these kind of, in my demographics, in particular in my field, there's people like are supporting each other. So I don't see it too much. But then what also I don't see is that people being really brutally honest one another to say, hey, that's either really dope, or that's kind of average, or you could do better, or that's absolutely terrible. Like, people don't want to say that's absolutely terrible. I believe that there's value in that.
Yeah,
If someone's
yeah.
absolutely terrible, you got to tell them. That's an act of love.
Honesty and self-awareness are things that are less present in the day-to-day, I find. And I don't know if it's more like ego catering, like people are scared to offend or to burn bridges, or what stops people from giving that feedback. But I think if you're sharing, like from my experience, I'll have a producer, slide in the DM and be like, oh bro, we want you on this. Yeah, it'll be sick. And some of the time I'll just be like, hey man, I listened to it, and I personally don't think it's something that I'll jump on, but like props for creating, and just keep going. And I'll like try to give a G up. You can have tact, but yeah, it's interesting to see. Most people are always happy to receive like an honest but tactful kind of thing, versus those who are just like.
If I look in most of my life, like those moments where people were brutally honest with me, are some of the moments that I have grown the most, and have had the biggest burst and the biggest insight into my own self-awareness. Like the biggest, like, actually, I look at sort of self-awareness as like, I don't know if you've ever played video games, but there's some video games that you go on and the map is all blacked out until you get there. So
yes, totally.
There's a blackout map. So I look at kind of consciousness or self-awareness like that. And there's these whole areas that you don't know what you don't know, and it's blacked out. And some of these truth bombs that I've been hit with have just blown up a whole area, which I've never had access to before, and I can now see. So, bring it on, I say. And there's probably a piece there that people are not willing to look as well. Like maybe they have heard the brutal honesty, or they know, but they're like, oh, I don't want to see it because I don't want to deal with what that means if that's true.
That's it. Whereas I think there's so much value in just tripling down on your self-awareness and going, like, I remember if I got that bit of feedback, like, man, don't worry about the beatboxing, keep going with this rapping. Like, I heard you like dabbling, and just like triple down on that. I could have been offended and been like, no, stuff you, mate. Like, but I don't know. As you said, the fog of war is a great analogy, that gaming thing, because then you can build more. Like when you know more, you do more, you build more, and you grow more, and you discover new unknowns. Yeah.
What's the piece there? Because like the piece of you going, okay, oh, fuck you, man, and versus, oh, actually, thanks, man. And then actually applying the new information, the new data. Like what do you feel is the mindset for you around that? Like why did you respond like that and others might respond a different way?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that were at play. There's like a more noble thing and a more petty thing, if I'm being honest. I think the noble thing was the fact that I was doing it not for me at the time. When I was getting into it, I was doing it for God or for the message. There was something bigger than myself. Exactly. I was obsolete.
You don't have to take it personally.
Yeah. I was like, oh, really? You think that's a better thing? Yeah, okay, well, that's going to create a better platform for the gospel. And then, yeah, let's do that. But it was just, I wasn't even a part of it. And I think I've somewhat kept that kind of mindset about like the message and the value of what you're trying, the sentiment, the intention of what you're bringing is kind of bigger than yourself or bigger than myself. And that's, I think, what got me into then freestyling and the idea of, I don't care if I get up and fumble in front of 1,000 people or whatever, because it's like that's secondary to the importance of just lifting up a bit of love and positivity and authentic connection. But I can't just claim it was all super solid. There was also definitely a sense of this pettiness coming into it, because I remember I got that feedback and then I went to record my very first song, my testimony song, my Christian testimony as a hip hop song. And it was at, I think, the same guy who gave me that feedback. I think it was his cousin or his brother, his house. And I remember they were MCs. They'd been in the game for years and years and years. I think they may have been Christian, so it's kind of funny in hindsight to think about. But I remember I was in their little home studio in their living room, and they gave me time with their Fruity Loops set up open to record a song. And as I was rapping and recording it and like trying to get it down, and I was just passionately doing it for the cause, I could hear them in the other room laughing. I could hear them laughing at how terrible I was, which sure enough, it was like, I think I was like, 17 or something. And I was just like fresh in, no skills, just too eager. I was like, yeah, let's get it out. And it was terrible. And I heard them laughing, and I felt that probably that first time musically, I felt that ego of like, you dare laugh at me? Like the sense of like, oh, I'm going to show your ass. I'm going to show you, motherfucker. So there's probably a little bit of like that petty spite, one of the greatest motivators of all time. Yeah, it was a mixture. It was probably a mixture.
Bit of a combo of both. And it's healthy. That's like, people are often afraid to own or claim these things. Like, you know, some of the things like jealousy and things, you know, have built empires, you know, like.
Yeah, it's real.
It's crazy, man. And
yeah, there you go.
The content, in terms of the content, do you curse when, you know, in Bullhorn songs and things like this? Is that something that I know there's some rappers out there don't curse. I'm not a big bit, like, there's not much explicit content when I write songs. There is if I want to make a point, but it's very, I think about it a lot. I hear some songs like Eminem and stuff, just fucking curse words left, right, and center.
Yeah.
But it's still artistic and stuff. But I don't know if that's like a Christian thing or just a personal preference thing, or.
I think it probably, I'm much the same. And I think it probably started as a bit of I definitely know for years I struggled with this like resonant Christian ideological moral issue, like, as all ex-Christians, you know, shout out to all my like struggling ideological rebuilders. But there's definitely this like resonant morality that makes you go like, oh, swearing, oh, that's bad. Why is it bad? Think about it. And then eventually I would swear with intention to make a specific point, which is how I do it now. So I'll relatively keep it clean. Sometimes I will keep it clean intentionally to like lure people into the sense of, oh, what a lovely chocolate man, you know, like that kind of, oh, this is and then you'll be like, you know, your Western fucking greed is the issue. And then it's like, whoa. Yeah, so. Yeah,
nice. Speaking on that, I love, and speaking of putting people on the spot, if you got a beat there, chuck it on and give us a little bit of thing, or you can hit us with an acapella. Oh. One of my favorite things to do is put people live on the spot. You didn't have no idea that I was going to even ask you this.
I might just click, because it's the only thing that I can trust to come across in the sound. You want to give me a word for the freestyle?
All right, let's go with existentialism and Christianity and ideologyism.
Multi-syllables, existentialism. Yes, I kicked the freestyle. None of this shit was written. You know, I had to jack in, then jack out of the system. It's like Neo speaking before I started to listen. Hey, take it back. The pot started sizzling. Yes, some say the same pot that I once pissed in. Came right out, and now I'm steadily insisting. You open up your mind just a little more. Division causes nothing but greed, nothing but hatred. I'm trying to find the question, the real sacred. Hey, so now it's bubbles in the basement like Rocky. That's when you really unlock the party. Whatever. I keep going.
And going. Awesome, man. And talk to us a little bit about what happens there when you're going into that space of, like, for you, is it like a muscle? So is it like those parts of your brain are so they're so toned and they're so well trained that it becomes easy after a while to think really quickly, as some would look at it? And is it something that as well for you, that if you don't practice for a week, a month, or whatever, does it dwindle the ability and capacity?
Sure. Well, the way I put it like this, if ever I'm doing a workshop or teaching students or something, I will always start with that kind of challenging the perspective of someone who says, do you think you can freestyle? And they're like, no, I just couldn't think of words that quick. Like, how, you know, there's a sort of magic trick illusion aspect to it. And I always ask whoever it is, when you woke up this morning, did you have to get up extra early than everyone else and write a script out for every conversation you were going to have for the day? And they're like, no. And I'm like, yeah, you freestyle content every single day. And the second you say that, like, eyes widen, and they're like, oh my God, like, it's just improvisation. And I'm like, so all that freestyle rap is doing is taking the mechanics of what you do every day naturally and adding musicality to your language, adding rhythm, adding the concept of rhyme, pitch, and then artistic sense of expectations and gratification or delay of those expectations. And basically it's like, most people freestyle without realizing it, and most people, I think, can freestyle rap. It just depends on, it's not about learning to freestyle, it's about learning to embrace discomfort. And that's why I like it, and that's why freestyle rap can work so well as like a life skills workshop with young people, because it's all about acknowledging that it's okay to be uncomfortable, and that's actually your growth zone, and that, or your flow zone. But, you know, that's where you start to flow. That's where you can find things. And that's literally how I started to do it. I was just like, let me just talk like I would normally, add a bit of rhythm, and then it sounds kind of like I'm killing it. Though I haven't even gratified with the rhyme. It still sounds like a rap just because of my rhythm. Put it in your voice. And like just starting with that and realizing like, man, most people aren't even listening to what I say at this gig. I can just do that if I can't rhyme. And then I was like, just fake it till you make it. And then eventually I would go, and then I'll think of another word here. And then your brain, as you listen to music, or I don't know if it's from music or from life, but the brain, it wants to rhyme. Like it wants to find the rhyme word. So once you're comfortable enough, those rhymes serve themselves. Like, sir, would you like me to appear right now? Like kind of comes and finds its way.
And being playful with it, I find is helpful. You know, definitely. Like if it's serious thing, that's when the tension comes and the choking comes. It's tightness. It's anxiety. But if it's just like, actually, we're trying to fuck up. You know,
exactly.
we're attempting to make mistakes, because there's no such thing as mistakes. We either win or we learn. That's a concept that I believe in fully. And it's a beautiful way to embody that. I love that you said that too, because it's something that every night when my kids go to bed, when I'm with them, you know, it's something we do affirmations, and one of them is that exactly that there's no such thing as mistakes, as making a mistake. We either win or we learn is one of the affirmations, and it's
totally
beautiful that we have a tool, we have a technique, we have. And there's the principle, and now we can actually apply it now with doing something here, freestyle, which is some of the best things ever are the mistakes. You're like, I didn't even mean to say that, and it caught you by surprise. I couldn't have said that if I tried to, you know, like it just comes through. So it's
totally. And I think that's such a noble and like high consciousness thing to embrace, is that you either win or you learn. For some people, and I think especially within that hip hop culture, it can be really hard to get into that space, because there's if you come from mainstream hip hop kind of battle rap culture, or American hip hop roots culture, where it's that kind of emerged out of street violence and an alternative to that kind of competitive space, it can still be really hard to access. So I remember when I was starting to freestyle, I wasn't in the space where I could be like, I'm either winning or learning. I still hated when I stuffed up. And for me, what got me past that, just for anyone who's like, oh, you know, I care too much, I can't let go of the fact that I hate myself when I stuff up or whatever. I started to think of it in terms of ego, and just going, hey, that's actually like things that hurt my ego benefit my soul and my character and makes me a more humble person. So I would step up to my first gig that was a residency improv gig. It was like 4 hours. And I remember being like, you're going to have to freestyle for 4 hours if no one shows up to this hip hop jam, man. This is crazy. And my ego was worried about getting embarrassed. And I remember thinking, I'm either going to win, as in it's either going to grow my career or grow my character. Like I'm either going to nail it. It'll be a rock star moment. It'll be fucking dope. Everyone will be like, no, this guy's sick. Or I'll fumble mid-flow. I'll forget it. I won't land it. And maybe there's someone in the house who's like an aspiring MC, because my first gig started as a hip hop jam. So it was kind of open mic. And I remember being like, if I fumble after killing it for an amount of time, then maybe someone's going to go, oh, fuck, yeah, cool. He's just human. He can get up. Man, I should get up. I should get up and do my thing. And I thought it's like, man, it's like you either win or you hurt your ego, which is actually you growing your character and growing your kind of, it's a win-win. And the second I unlock the win-win, it unleashes your confidence. You're like, oh, fuck it. You just win. You've just already won. You just go for it.
It's a beautiful thing. Have you seen the Defiant Ones?
I started the first episode of that. Yeah. It was good.
So I saw the first of it the other day, and it reminds me of something that Jimmy Iovine said. He said that moment that the fear that he had, it turned from a headwind into a tailwind. You know, and that concept in itself is just so beautiful. Like fear can be a headwind or it can be a tailwind. And it just stuck with me. I'm like, that's exactly right. Like it's, that's probably one of the most poignant quotes that I've heard all year. It's just like, that sums it up.
Fear I love that.
Fear can because it assumes that you're always soaring and flying and you're heading somewhere. And then it's like, well, we're heading somewhere always. That's a given. So it can either stop us and slow us down, or it can speed us up and get us to the destination further. So, and then it also, it has this idea as well. If you have an ego, if you even, because I feel healthy ego is fine, and you have these ideas of you actually want to create something of merit, of greatness, of whatever it is for you, and you know, it's kind of a boost in a way. It's like it boosts you to want to actually welcome the tailwind. You're like, bring it on the fear, because it's going to help me go faster.
Yes, 100%. That's such a good way to think about it. And as a tangent from that episode, I got to give a shout out as well. That little sample, Dr. Dre Marvin Gaye beat that he previews at the studio, where it's just like, I want you. And it's just that Dre treatment. I remember finding petitions online to get Dre to release that beat. There's like online communities around that single beat.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
It's wild.
That's a big, that whole series. And I love that. Like, I'm not somebody who gives myself too much time to watch like Netflix and things like this if it doesn't specifically relate to where I'm going in my goals. So I was like, oh, Defiant One, yeah, that's kind of, it's aligned. It's going to give me, I love the hip hop culture. I love the entrepreneurial side of it, like the Fifth Element side of it. So I love that people are there and can go, you know, look at Eminem, who came from, you know, the failing his ninth grade, however many times he did, came from the abusive relationships, all the stuff that he come through. And now, you know, him, Dre, billionaire, like, it's just like coming from nothing to something that inspires me. And moving into what I'm moving into now with the speaking and all the stuff I'm doing here it's like, okay, I can see how that aligns. It's inspirational stuff. So I'm gonna spend some time soaking up what these other people are creating. And I love the creation as well. If I get down that rabbit hole of like watching a series or something, I'm just like, oh my God, like, this is so beautifully made and shot. Imagine how many people are on set, the writers, all the thousands of hours of the actors who have done acting. Like, it's just, I'll just start focusing on that too much. I'm like, I just have to say no. I have to say no unless it's like directly related. And for you with content wise, like, are there specific, I know with Bullhorn, or I have an idea, it's just like, yep, you said there's charted songs, people will write a song, you come in and do your thing. Is there like an overarching kind of intention with the group that you're heading towards when you write, or when like if a song's written, are people going to come in and go, well, that's totally not us, are there many no's that go on when people present a tune and like, that's not what we're about?
I mean, sometimes yes, sometimes there's a no, like, that comes up. Someone's just, and like, but everyone's pretty self-aware in the band. Like, everyone will come in, and some people will just say, look, to be honest, I just want to hear the horns play through this because I've had the idea in my head. Like, I remember one time one of the guys arranged Johnny Cash Hurt, and it was like, this is not going to find space in the middle of a get down, you know, like, but it was just to hear it. And then sometimes something that we know shouldn't work ends up sparking an idea that does work or lend itself to an innovative kind of sound. But yeah, I think everyone's pretty much in their own space. There's a kind of celebration of individualism in that everyone has their own different background of music or something that gets them excited, that inspires their writing, and they'll come in with the chart for that reason. Or someone will just hit me up directly like, hey bro, I've got this idea. What do you think about if we do this? And then I'll link up, do a one-on-one, and then I'll add my non-formal trained music kind of ear to it and be like, bro, what if instead of that it was like like
that's exactly how I speak in the studio too. you know, and I'll make sounds and shit. They're like, you know, the thing, they're like, give me some of that terms that they have no idea, but they know it's the same language. They know exactly what you're talking about.
And that's the beauty of music. I find like that's the thing I'm getting really interested in, is like that common ground that can exist between someone who has language for it and someone who doesn't have language for it, but you both hear it. And just like you were saying with the Defiant Ones.
Give me some more of that ching-a-ling.
Yeah. Leave the hissing in. Don't take the hissing out. Like, I don't know. There's something about music that's always that, I don't know, it's elusive, mystical quality to it. That, like the Defiant Ones, you were mentioning Dre going from his room studio to a internationally renowned billionaire status. But what was the vehicle that enabled that journey. It was that first time someone heard his initial, you know, old school ding 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 ding, ding ding, or whatever he was doing as that, like Dr. Dre, and just that thing that it causes in people.
Oh, the Dr. Dre stuff, yeah.
Yeah, like the back in the day stuff. And just that initial, like, what is it in music that makes people like, what is it about hip hop that makes people just like, whoo, just that flavor, you know? It's something interesting that, I don't know, I haven't found too much language around that. People just know if it's dope or not. But there's something mystical.
That's like, there's good examples of all genres as well. Like, you know, people always get the question, what kind of music you into? And I'm like, well, I like good music. Like, it's like, if there's good examples and terrible examples and mediocre examples and average examples and above average examples of all music. And I personally, well, I don't even feel like it's my choice. It's like my body likes good and great examples of all the types, you know? So
yes.
As soon as it hears it, it's like, there's not one particular genre that is like terrible. Like that a good example of is terrible, because it's like, well, this moves me. I feel this, you know, and it's like, I can appreciate it if it doesn't necessarily move my body. I'm like, oh, this sounds like it's whatever the genre is. It's like, this is fucking dope, you know?
Totally.
And when you write as well, for me, I will often write for the crowd. Like, I have the crowd in mind when I'm writing. I'm like, all right, I'm writing. I want people to move to this, or I want people to jump around. I want people to feel a certain way, and that's what will guide my writing. Is that something? How does your process work?
I think content. I think I start with myself. What do I want to hear in a song? And I should try and fill that space if I can. And that's where it starts. And I'll try and phrase it in a way that inspires me on a lyrical language level, which is my root in hip hop. I forgot to kind of say that. I fell in love with the language because I was just a big language nerd, and that's what got me into it on an extreme.
What was the language nerd? Like, were you studying like linguistics or something? Like, what were you doing?
Just through high school, man. I was that English subject prize nerd every year. And I was like, how do I make this cool? How do I leverage this into a thing? And I saw a documentary on freestyle rap right around the time where my faith had changed. And freestyle, the art of rhyme.
Okay.
If you don't know it, I used to have it on like DVD back in the day. It's like, it's classic.
The one I got, I know that one. The one that got me into it was the Wake Up Show freestyles. That was like 96 or 90. I think maybe.
Is that Sway?
Sway and King Tech, yeah.
Okay.
Back on VHS, it was like, it was like with
awesome.
Juice, Eminem, Tech Nine.
Yes.
Like Big L was in there. Biggie, like absolutely old school.
But yeah, I remember watching.
Similarly to you, I was on that English tip too. I remember one of my first English like tests that I had. I didn't want to do it. Like, I was like, I was not that interested in school when I was in school, and there was one class I in particular, this one teacher, I didn't like them. They didn't like me, and it was obvious. And I was just sitting there. Everyone else is writing their test, and I'm like, all right, I better do. After it was like an hour-long thing, and the last 10 minutes, I'm like, all right, I'm bored. I should just do this. And I decided to write the whole story. It was like, write a story, essentially, a short story. And I just wrote down, within the last 10 minutes of it, I just wrote a story, but it was all in rhyme. It was like, blah, 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 blah. I rhymed it. Because I was into freestyle around the time. So I was like, oh, I may as well write something. And for that, I got like an A+. Got an A+ for it. I'm like, oh, like this is, I could do this. And I guess that kind of was like, okay, cool. As much as I hated the school, I was like, A+ kind of feels good having those ratings, so I can relate to that nerdiness,
Absolutely. It's essentially that passion point of what makes you come alive. Like language, something about English. Like, one of my favorite lyricists of all time is a poet by the name of Rabindranath Tagore. It's this old Indian poet, mystic, who was so academic as well that when the time came to translate all of his works to English, he like made sure he did the translations himself to preserve the quality of the vibe and And some of his stuff is like, for me, it's like Rabindranath Tagore is one of the most beautiful lyricists I know of. And then it's like next to Black Thought from the Roots, and, you know, everyone else who jumps in as a great songwriter. But that language point, I think, is when I saw the freestyle documentary Art of Rhyme. I was like, man, it's like adrenaline, language chess. You got to fit your words in, but you also need to do it in such a way that you're dancing with concepts in a way that is meaningful and entertaining. And yeah, I was hooked. I remember watching that and I was hooked. I was like, man, I don't care how good or bad I am at this. I'm gonna just do it. Like,
have you got any bars memorized from Rabindranath?
That I do. Just a couple of the great standouts for me. One excerpt. He was kind of like a creationist in the way that he was a spiritual kind of beholder of God, the unknown God, creator of the universe kind of God. But he had a couple of things like, we are all but children playing in the king's courtyard. And just stuff that just hits a bit resonant. But one of my favorites, which is it's like a kind of a message of almost like a heed the warning kind of thing, was the song that I came to sing has gone unsung. I've spent the years of my life stringing and unstringing my instrument. Yeah. And I remember that, like, oh shit, that's like the most poetic what not to do. So I think, yeah, that was like engine. That was fueling the freestyle engine of like, you know, fuck whether you're ready, just start doing the things that, you know, you feel alive with. Because
and is that something that you did? Because I get quite nerdy as well in terms of, like, I was reading books, and since probably around the year 2000 in particular, I was heavily into personal development from that age, and getting into Anthony Robbins, and I was consistently reading books and actually looking to explore and expand my consciousness, both with learning with books and also with like psychonautic adventures as well. And so for me, getting really nerdy with the expansion and how deep I could go in something, it led me to things like I think it was Gladwell, you know, the concepts of 10,000 hours, getting this up and really going deep on how I could become a super learner. There was like Tony Bazan stuff and speed learning and speed reading and all this type of stuff. So for me, that helped guide my trajectory with rap in particular and the words and learning. So I remember even before that, actually, when we had tape decks back on tape, I was recording like hip hop shows and learning lyrics from some of the rappers, rewind right down before any, you know, Genius website or before any internet. So like, I was really nerdy with knowing what they said, and then I like doing it myself, and then learning their stuff, coming up with my own stuff. And then it just became a constant, how would you call it? For me, it was like a battle against myself, how quickly and how much practice I could get in to get really good at this new thing, you know? So, that allowed me, you know, I realized the other day I was rapping with a friend of mine who I just met. She's 22 years old. I'm like, God damn, I started rapping when you were 2. You know, it's like,
wow.
Like, oh my Lord, you're rapping a long time. But for you, what was your process of getting good at the thing?
Man, to be honest, I think there's been this part of me that carried over, again, that resonant Christianity shit kind of drove a lot of how I thought about the world post, like AD, you might say it, after the death of faith, which isn't really the death of faith, not to go on a tangent, but just to flag that. I always thought of faith as an energy, as in it's like energy never dies, it just transfers. So you might go from faith in a organized religion to just faith that life is still worth living and plenty of, you know, value in it to discover. So I, from that Christian experience, took one thing that I remember thinking about in church, which was, what are we talking about? All this preach the gospel, articulated message of God there. What about like Zabumbu out in the desert who has never met another human being and will go his whole life never knowing another human being except his immediate tribe, and they will live and die. How like God should be, and I remember thinking this as a Christian, it was probably one of the seeds of doubt that blossomed into rational thinking. But I remember thinking like, God should be accessible to any human being, no matter what place or time they exist in. And that should be the true experience of God, should be applicable to any human journey, if that is the case. So for that reason, I think I was almost basically it's like when you've been in a cult or any kind of organized ideological system and you get your mind back from it and you get free from it, you're very wary about what you lend your mind to again in the future. So I think I had a bit of hesitance, even culturally with hip hop, to subscribe to any way that it should be done or any idea, even the whole like the tenets of hip hop and that like KRS-One, you know, real hardcore ideological way of looking at hip hop. I was very resistant and still am to any structured belief system or structured way of doing things. So I think that kept me away from books, if anything, for a long time. Probably to my detriment. I'm a conversationalist and I've kind of kept language alive in my life through conversation, but I've never read and I've never had that thesaurus, or I probably am guilty of the rhyming dictionary at a few points in my songwriting career. But I think generally speaking, I never really learned. I just was committed. Like, if this is something that is in me, it should be able to come through me from nothing else. And I had this like a weird militant sort of adherence to that kind of no external input is needed if this is true for me. And I kind of associated it almost with my new ideological journey of like I was initially freestyling just to heal myself by myself. I was out at the ocean looking at the stars, and I would just, in place of prayer, in place of Christian worship or anything, I would kind of just be rapping and just trying to like get all these hectic thoughts out. And that would translate to my little residency freestyle gig. That was people out trying to have a nice time over a cold drink, and I'm there rapping about like considering suicide and existential meaning and what is this and what is not, and all sorts of crazy shit. But for me, that was kind of where I came from, which is, if it's truthful, I can make it work. If it's not truthful, I may as well be dead. And that sounds really intense, but that was the kind of like realness that I was working with, because I was like, Christianity is very dangerous, or any organized religion that you walk away from is dangerous in giving you this like very indulgently articulate meaning of life, and it's all laid out for you and it's all clearly cut. And then when that's taken away, it can feel very offensive to not have something like that. It's very offensive to be like, life is what you make it, you know, find the meaning as you live. That just sounds very empty when you're coming out of something, like when you're used to being like mouth fed. It's very different. So musically, I think I just I had to construct my way of thinking about hip hop, my way of thinking about music. That's why for a long time, I didn't say I was an MC. I was like, I'm just a dude who does a thing, but I don't even associate with that. I didn't want to be called anything. And then eventually my own wankery caught up to me, and I was like, nigga, you an MC. Like, shut the fuck up. Like, what are you trying to, like... So, I mean,
you're like, come on, man. It's just, yeah.
I'm more of a word artist. Like...
Word artist. Yeah. It's like, so basically you're trying to tell me you're an MC, right?
Yeah. If there's a ceremony, I'm known to master it.
It's like, if you can flip it up, it's I'm a word crafter or something like this, because it'd be like MC upside down, right?
Yeah. I'm a CM. But yeah, man, that's pretty much like my whole thing. I've just recently recommitted to the idea of like, I'm getting that hunger back for what has basically, I initially just wanted to listen to myself, listen to the silence, listen to other people, and just listen. And I didn't have much to say. That's why I freestyle. I didn't have anything to come and write down. I was just here to go. And most of my freestyling was questions based. It was all like, why do we do this? And why do we do that? And I don't care. And I'm pretty sure that's not real. But like, it was just kind of questioning. And then over time, I've kind of developed an appetite, I guess, to listen in depth to what other people have experienced, come to. So I'm starting to read again, starting to listen to podcasts, you know, shout outs to the great Joe Rogan and all the various voices and stories that he has come through the medium. But it's a beautiful thing to like be listening actively, because it does help the music. And I think I'm late on that journey, but I'm early in another sense.
100%. And I love that you mentioned there about listening, because that was one of the biggest lessons that I took when I first started writing. I don't know how many people know, but my mother's ex-partner is his name's Gil Scott Heron, and he's the guy who taught me how to write, in a sense, write music, write songs, or write raps, or like write verses. And I was like, I was drawing a lot back then. This was like when I was 13, 14. And he's like, oh, you freestyle? Yeah, I freestyle a little bit. And he's like, do you write? I'm like, no, I don't know about writing. I just know how to freestyle. I'm like, I've got nothing to say. I'm 13. You know, I'm just
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
well, and he's like, well, here, come with me. I'll show you. And he's talking about, all right, what you want to do is grab your pen, grab your pad, and then just listen. And what do you mean listen? He's like, just listen to the spirits and see what comes through. And when you hear something, just grab it and literally grab it with like your pen, and then put it down on the paper and keep writing until, if your pen stops, it means you're not listening anymore. So it's like, as soon as your pen stops, shut up, stop your mind, because you're trying to do it. You're not listening. You're too much exertion. And then stop, and then listen again. And when you grab something, get it, because it comes in. And so the ideas are always there, but you got to shut up and listen so you can grab it, and then it can come through you. And that stuck with me since, you know. So
that's beautiful.
It's beautiful. You know, a lot of people talk about writer's block. I'm like, well, your mind's too busy. You know, your mind, you're trying to do it. If you just shut up and listen, no such thing as writer's block. It's
that forgetting Sarah Marshall, do less. Do less. No, you can't just lay down. Now you're doing nothing. You got to do a little more than that.
A little more. Actually, let the pen move, right?
Yeah.
But it's true, man, and that relates also to the mindfulness stuff. Is listening is the big key. You know, it's a powerful thing.
If you don't mind me asking, man, just hearing a bit of your story there, what for you? I mean, that sounds like a powerful way to get introduced to the idea of like being a practitioner of art, because you're almost more like carrying it rather than having to create it. But what for you is at this point in your life, what's one of your motivations with your art? Like what is causing you joy to enact art?
The first thing that comes to mind when you ask me that question is my children.
Yeah.
It's just like, I often will say, like, there's no need for me to kind of do anything else more than just survive. If it's just me, you know, it's like, what more do I need to do? I'm happy just living and doing my thing. And,
sure.
You know, having clients as well is like, all right, cool. I can serve clients. I'm in a position where I get to inspire, help, support, work with people to allow them to feel some of the stuff that I have in terms of like finding out who I am, what I want to do, what I want, you know, what I feel is my purpose, stuff like this. I'm in a position where I get to help that. So that's a bit inspirational and actually get me to do more things than just survive. But in terms of like really filling me up and overflowing is my kids. And when I say that, it's like being a role model for them and being an example of what is possible and what is, you know, especially if I look back and look what I didn't have and what I would love them to have that I didn't have.
Yeah.
You know, that for me is one of the biggest inspirations for me that gets me going. And then there's the big vision as well, having going from someone who didn't have any idea what I wanted, who I was, you know, I didn't have much guidance as a youngster, so I was like figuring it all out a lot of myself. So I was like, had no idea what I wanted to do. And then that big void of having kind of no purpose, a big sense of feeling lost or by myself, led to me really quadrupling down on self-awareness and on personal development and who am I, and delving deep with those questions, and led me now to being like, well, if you want to know what your purpose is or have an idea of what it might be, or if you want to go from lost to actually knowing exactly why the fuck you're here, for me, it's to inspire millions of people to take up a mindfulness practice, because that's helped me so much and I've seen the benefit it has had in so many people's lives. And every one of my actions, pretty much every one of my actions, thoughts or words, the ones that I'm aware of, are guided by that idea.
Powerful, bro. That's beautiful. And I mean, I feel a bit challenged and inspired what you were saying with your children, of how by yourself it's enough to survive, but then there's this beautiful kind of almost a different sort of brand of ego death that happens with children, or what I've only witnessed it in my friends who have had kids, and I'm kind of like godfather, so I'm that guy who thinks he knows a little something, but really I know shit, you know, like
there's levels to this, man. There's levels to it.
There is levels to it for sure. I'm in like the lobby, just I've pressed the button, I'm in the lobby, like, yeah.
You can watch the screen. You can watch the screen. But finish what you were saying about the level.
Yeah, it's like just that ego death of, I mean, everyone knows that kind of, the cliche sentiments of like, kids give us the chance to be better than who we were and stuff. It's like Monday gives you that chance, like
waking up does, right?
But there's like a poetic, evolutionary / spiritual component to it. And I think that's beautiful to hear when it comes into your art. Because like it is, the parent's journey is, I think, a universal but unique thing. And it's an extra, I don't know, it's interesting to hear you articulate it as an artist. That's cool.
Yeah, and for me, I have this concept of growth artistry as well. There's this concept of being a growth artist, and that is almost like a life artist. My life is my art, and the way that I carry myself in that role model. If you look at a model, it's a piece of art, right? So it's like, or it could just be a model of like a architectural model, for instance, but still art, still have to be created. And my life is my art, especially now moving in. I'm on stage now, not just rapping at people and sharing my creative, whatever wants to come through, but I'm on there sharing my story, actually stepping into this role model role of like, actually, I've been places that are pretty dark, pretty fucked up, pretty difficult, pretty struggle. And now I'm in a place where actually I'm enjoying myself. I'm full of love, full of direction, full of joy, overflowing fulfillment. And that in itself, so the way that I live my life and the way that I carry myself and the way that I think and the way that I speak and the way that I behave is actually my art now. And it has to now becoming a speaker, especially if you look at your art in this way as well. If you're talking stuff on a track, for instance, for me, it's like, oh, it's not me. Like you were saying earlier, it's just whatever wants to come through me. It's not necessarily me. I'm not talking about myself a lot of the time in my songs. It's just words that are coming through. But now I'm talking my story. There's a less of a detachment to it, and it's me. So I'm like, fuck, my integrity has to go up to a whole new level. I'm literally being a talker. A speaker is what I'm being paid for now as I move into. So I'm like, oh shit, now I have to really walk my talk because I'm gonna be damaging my own self-esteem, my own integrity, my own self-belief if I'm not stepping into that. And obviously there's room for nobody's perfect, but it's like, well, there's a whole new level of the game is real now.
Yeah, absolutely, man. 100%. I feel that. I've done a bit of speaking and I've held down day jobs that involve life skills speaking. And I remember doing, like, for example, talking to young, like, high schools around procrastination and study life skills. And I was like, well, why do we procrastinate? And then I just was like, you know what? I can tell you why I haven't been to gym this month. And I just kind of owned my story. And they went from like, you gonna talk about procrastination, big boy? Into like, oh, wow, yeah, that is true. And that's how I am with my thing. It's a tough dance between where you want to be, where you're at, where people perceive you to be as a speaker who's talking to them, and then where you're actually at, where you're like, man, like we out here, so I'm like, no one can escape. They're out here.
We are out here, bro. And in terms of the levels as well, I was talking about before with things like with having children, there's things like my level of care. I never had. There's two emotions that I'd never really felt until I had children. One of them being pride, especially for other people. There's this whole concept of like being dad proud. I have this whole new sense of if someone else achieves something, I just feel so overwhelmed with pride. Tears are in my eyes. I feel overjoyed. Never had that before I had kids. Never experienced this huge, overwhelming sense of pride for someone else's achievements. Like I felt it like, oh, that's awesome. But it's never like welling up and like, oh my Lord, like I actually feel like you've extended me by your actions.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing. And the other one is like this idea of worry. Like if I leave someone and I'm like, make sure you text me when you get home. And if I haven't heard from someone for a few days or a few weeks, I'm like, fuck, is this person all right? Like there's this sense of worry that you get, or that I've received since having children that I never experienced that before. Before I'm like, yeah, people will be cool. People will be fine. Yes, and now I can relate to a lot of other parents who are like, oh shit, I should have called you for those 4 days that I didn't call you.
Yeah. It's funny because what you just shared, it reminds me of actually probably what is my favorite poem in short by that Rabindranath Tagore guy. And it speaks to this whole cycle, this whole growth of life. And it's a simple 3-liner where it says, I slept and dreamt. No, I think it was, I dreamt that life was joy. I woke and found that life was duty. I acted, and behold, duty was joy.
Hey.
And it's this like cyclic. I mean, it can go into every terrain of life, but it's that flip of like, you have that worry. It's like that, all that like, I'm not ready to be a dad, kind of the fear of like, you know, I have to be responsible for a being and all that kind of like stuff, which I'm still very much in. I'm like in many ways, like, I think I'm ready. And then I'm also like, I'm not ready. But then you see the beautiful joy of that. It's great.
You get ready. Once you're ready, it's like, shit, you got to be, man. You got to be.
Yeah.
And it's one thing I'm grateful for as well, like, is the fact that I have a good relationship. You know, I'm separated with the mother of my children, but we're friends. You know, we have a great relationship, and I feel that's
beautiful.
Putting that above yourself and your own bullshit and your own grudges, I feel is far more important than anything else. And also the concept of woke people, anyone who's actually got some head on their shoulders and is essentially not a retard. Because a lot of people who have no awareness. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but there's no awareness of a lot of things. Are having a lot of children, you know. So I feel that, you know, just to even out the numbers, people who have some sense of what is going on, it's almost like you said, duty to actually expand this side of, or you know, that side of the population.
Yeah, totally. And I think there's something to be said for those who are parents without having their own children, like those who step into a mentoring role. I'm thinking of like shout out Mr. Miyagi characters, you know, who just take on someone's child and instill a moral compass in them, or sneak some life lessons.
The teachers, like 100%, the instructors, the sensei, 100%.
100. But it is a thing. It is a thing.
And so that's something that you actually do as well. So you work with youth, is it? Like when you're doing workshops, is it a particular age group or?
I've been in different capacities. I've worked in different capacities. I kind of do a bit of this and that. At the moment, it's probably now more just under my own kind of freelance capacity, music based, but it's usually life skills through freestyle rap. And because really it's like someone will hit me up, be like, man, you know, like I want to learn a freestyle. I'm like, you want to learn to become like,
you're like, that's boring.
Yeah. It's like,
this is your gateway drug is freestyle into.
Exactly. It's like, you know, what do you have to say? And not even what do you have to say, but what do you have to question about what do you have to say? And that tennis game goes on forever. So I just find it like, I don't know. So high school students, I keep it age appropriate with high school students. And, you know, sometimes it's just like a leadership thing. You know, I've done things now that to a school or organization looks impressive on like a, you know, this international touring artist who's a freestyle performer and all the what do they call them? Accolades that get you through a door to simply have a human moment. And that's kind of where I'm at. And I'm at a place where I've kind of closed one chapter of touring and I've kind of opened a new chapter, and I'm working out how committed it's going to be in the workshop-y speaking space, because I think I might be going back into the film world from a documentary listening kind of agenda. But
so that I'm like, porque no los dos, I'm like joining together.
Absolutely, definitely. Why not both? It could be.
So do you have the high school kids who know you worked with them over years, or like they're like, you know, that are kind of like children to you and you've instilled with them some stuff? Or
that's definitely a thing. I was working with Griffith University for a few years, probably like into my 5th year this would have been, and then at the start of this year I had to leave that role to go overseas and do some touring. But I worked with students from like year 11. I saw them go from year 11 through to year 12, some went into some went into university study and elsewhere. And, you know, you just form a certain bond. Like I'll be out and they'll still be like, oh, sir. And there's that whole category of people who like will be like, hey. And then there'll be a separate category of people who might know me as a Bullhorn kind of show context. And they'll be like, oh, hey, dude, it's that. And you can always tell the flavor of the recognition. It's always like there's a sentiment in different contexts. But yeah, I definitely feel in some ways I don't know if I'm ready, mature enough to say a father to some people, but I think I've been like a big brother at least. Yeah.
No doubt. I know there's some people like that for you, like, and this is a theme that kind of comes up quite a bit these days in terms of like coming of age and rites of passage and masculinity and moving from boy to man, moving from girl to woman, these types of ideas. What's been your experience of these things in your life, and what have you witnessed as well coming from overseas to here? Have you spent much time overseas, or has your experience been mostly here? Yeah, just jam a bit out on some of these things for us.
Yeah. Also important to flag, coming from non-binary to evolved non-binary. Like, I don't even know the language around that kind of journey, but it's definitely coming of age, right? I think for me, man, like,
beautiful. Thanks for bringing that up. All my non-binary fans are going to be hating on me for missing that one.
No, full inclusion, full, always. Diversity is the universe. But it was, for myself, I really, to be honest, don't know how to process that question, because it kind of triggers 50,000 different thoughts at once. And I would say, to boil it down, I am living an experience, and I'm currently in transition, so it's hard to know any definite, articulate answers to that. But I think travel has taught me to be humble in a new way that I thought it redefined humility for me in many ways, and it reaffirmed the human connection, human sameness that I was aware of, that like everyone's the same. Like we're all spiritual beings living a human experience, that like moon fresh, bless up kind of sentiment. It's powerful. But I think in terms of my coming of age experience, or my whole journey with art, or even just as a human being, I'm not sure, and I'm being okay in that place of being not sure. Like I'm kind of surrendering to the mystery of what's next and what's now and what's been. Like I'm aware of what I know to be good in terms of value. Like I know it's important. Love is important. Honesty is important. Vulnerability is important. Listening is important. And outside of those kind of basic fundamentals, I just seek to leave someone's life how I found it, or add to it, and not run from it. And outside of that, that's literally as far as I'm taking it at this chapter of my life. I'm pretty like open book, and for that reason, I've just waffled for like 10 minutes without actually answering your question. That's all I got.
So you have an experience. So in terms of masculinity, in terms of your like, do you have any father figures, bigger brother figures that you've had, or like on the other end of the spectrum? Have you had the motherly figures, or like the feminine, really present in your life? What's been your experience there?
I have amazing. I've had amazing parents. My dad is a genius. Like he's a brilliant man, but he's a good man, and I think he's a better man than he is a thinker, and he's an insane thinker. Like he can articulate. He's the OG wordsmith in my life, and I'm just like, I listen to things and I always want to take notes and write certain analogies down. I'm like, what the fuck? That's insane. That was so good.
Bootleg his thing real quick.
Yeah, right. I actually did record him once. He was saying something and I just recorded him. I'm going to use this as a sample on my future album at some point. I know it. But he's been a legend in terms of my thinking and the kind of discovery, the journeyman of exploration of ideas, the terrain of humanity, just being really open and growing my thinking. And my mom, who passed away a couple of years ago now, she's been like this like Mother Teresa, like post, like cornerstone of ethics and what it is to live a good life. And like that was before she actually she got into Christianity and stayed, like she went out like a gospel mama but she was a good woman her whole life, and she was a powerful revolutionary woman at that. So I've definitely taken on a lot of lessons that I have and don't have articulations for, just a whole myriad of lessons from both my mom and my dad. And that's probably my main point of call. That's my Alamo that I fall back to when life's getting tough. Probably after this podcast, I'll go for like a sunset walk and talk with my dad and try to reconnect and just stay humble, you know, sit down and listen and just like, yeah, just share. But it's interesting to know I'm definitely at the age now where I can share an idea and come to the table with my dad and be like at a peer level in some regards. And then Papa Bear shows himself at one point and you're just there like, oh, true that. Like, you know, you got a lot of life on me, old timer. Like,
well, rest in power to Mama Bear. It sounds like they've done a good job. And in terms of, are there certain moments that you really remember that have stood out, whether it's a question they asked you or a perspective they offered you that has stuck with you and guided a lot of how you operate nowadays?
Yeah.
Maybe take one from each.
From my mom, I remember specifically after I had lost my faith and I was really curious about ethics and morality, and I kind of had no moral compass articulated to me anymore. I was like, what happens now? Do you just become a serial killer? Like, what do you do? Like, there's no rules for anything. And I looked at my mom's life and I remember seeing and witnessing everyone say about her, she always lived a completely noble life. And within Christianity, there's this narrative motif of the testimony. There was this, and then God, and now this. And everyone was a piece of shit, and then God, and now they're this amazing thing, apparently. Whereas my mom was always amazing, and God just became a part of that story. So I took her out for coffee one time. I remember I specifically took her out purely to ask her one question. I said, hey, why have you always lived so good? Because you can't tell me it's by the the transformative power of Jesus Christ. You know, like, I know you were always this person, so why have you always lived like this? And you can't, because she knew the place I was in without religion, and she was like very empathetic to that. And she shared with me something that changed my life forever, so it's probably the thing I can share that's of the most value. She said, growing up as a woman in the era that she did, in the country that she did, the most important thing to her was freedom. And she's lived a life where she was like the first female journalist to go on television, and she was a world-traveling journalist. She interviewed Yasser Arafat and all these world leaders and went to conflict zones. She lived this crazy, like, Forrest Gump kind of life. And so with that context, I kind of knew that she meant it to her core when she started to talk about freedom. That's always been a thing. And her mom taught her when she was growing up that like when you lie, for example, she said, this is what she told me. She's like, when you lie to someone, you rob them of their intrinsic human right to the truth. And she said that with the commanding power of a journalist, like a true OG journalist, not like Trump era kind of stuff. Like, this is like, yeah, she said, when you lie to someone, you rob them of their intrinsic right to the truth. And whether or not that lie remains undiscovered, that debt that you have to that person goes on your like personal human ledger. And she's like, so when I grew up and I realized this, I made a decision that no quick lie or no quick pleasure or quick fix was worth my freedom, and no one would take my freedom from me. Mm-hmm. And she dropped that. I was just like, oh, like, I think we're sitting in some like cafe near a food court and there's heaps of people around. I just started crying. It just like hit me. I was like crying, like proper, like weep, heavy, large black man crying in public, you know? And I think is what stuck with me. And that's what kind of led me to the simple, basic operation guide of owe no person, in the sense of, if you encounter a life, seek to add to it or leave it as you found it, but don't rob from someone emotionally. Don't use someone. Don't, like, if you gossip about someone, you rob them of their dignity, of their story, all those different things that play out in how you can treat, and basically just not be an arsehole. But I think that
don't be a dick.
Comes, yeah, don't be a dick, right? And that comes through all the way into my songwriting today. Like, any Bullhorn people who ever hear this will know one of Bullhorn's like cheesier but more popular singles is Resonate Right. The chorus to that is a direct translation of that conversation, where I say, in my heart, in my mind, in my soul, freedom, that's inner freedom. Only you can grant yourself inner freedom. That's knocking at your door. And that's like, I remember I was writing that and I was just like, man, that's the thing that I know to write about now in place of the gospel, which I didn't know. I was like, this shit has some real life implication and meaning to it. So no offense to any Christians, by the way, if that's what you believe, respect. It could be real, I could be going to hell, who knows. But I think it's important to just be honest with where you're at. And that's my mom. And my dad, I don't really have a lesson that is articulated, but the most powerful thing my dad ever taught me was in the midst of my Christianity, when I was trying to save his divorced, single, rambunctious, flirtatious soul. I took him out. I was catching up with him and trying to preach the gospel to him. I was like some arrogant 18-year-old or something like that. It's so cringy, right? You just want to beat yourself up. But anyway,
it sounds like a good time.
He took me out on a balcony once, and he threw me over the edge. No, he didn't. He just took me out on the balcony. And
he held me over the edge real quick.
Yeah, he got me to look up at the stars. And he got me to look up at the stars. In the midst of me thinking I had all the answers for him, if you could only listen, you know, he got me to look at the stars and he said, "Hey, son," and this is before I knew his whole backstory of his childhood and how he was once training to become a priest and his whole journey with spirituality. He made me look at the stars and he said, "Son, understand this. No one does and has and will ever know what this is." And that's a good thing. That's a beautiful thing. And that's where power. And like, he didn't say that's what power is, but he said like, that's the most important thing to remember. And he said it, and he just used those words, but implied was the sense of like, be humble in your existence and don't be so arrogant to think you who exists for a millisecond of the lifespan of the universe, you've got it sorted out. You know, that kind of, that stuck with me. And again, I can trace that to another song that I wrote, which opens with the lyrics, "Staring at the stars won't get you very far. That's a lie, ill-devised by the iller side. I came to questions in my mind through my inner cry. Tried to diminish and deny with many philosophy. Blah, blah, blah." And it just like is where I speak from now, is those lessons from my parents. So shout outs to both of them.
Shout outs to the folks. Shout outs to the folks.
And
in terms of the, somebody asked me a question the other day. They said, I was talking about the biggest lesson I learned from my brother's death. And then they said, "Oh, do you feel him with you?" Like, you know, they said, "I feel one of my friends who committed suicide. I feel them with me a lot of the time." And is that something that you experience? Because I heard you mention earlier, I remember you talking about how energy is not created or destroyed. It just transforms. Is that something that you've, excuse me, is that something that you've experienced with your mother? Or I know, yeah. So yeah, what's that been like in terms of, especially going in terms of Christian? I don't know what the deal is there with reincarnations and a concept or an idea, or what the idea is there. But how does that all sit with you?
For me, it's I remember like having a big existential reflection on it when she was passing away, and then when she passed away, I was just like, it's interesting to know, like, interesting to consider that our lives are lived as before you're born. No one knows that you're coming until your parents go, "Oh shit, I'm late," or like whatever moment happens where that's your first existence in the mind of someone. You exist in the mind of someone before. Then you are physically forming, and then you're born. You live a physical life where your actions, your words, your ideas are having an influence and impact on people. And then there's this moment where you physically check out and you transition back into the memories of people, and you transition back into the lasting ideological impacts that you've had on people. And I think that for my mom, it's that kind of journey with me where I feel her with me in the sense that I know genetically I'm half of her. Ethically, I'm like 80% her, you know, like shout outs to my dad, but I think we both know that mom took a little extra curve on the ethics kind of. No, I'm just giving them a hard time. But I feel her with me in the sense that I've been lucky enough to have a mom who was so interested in knowing who I was and in nurturing who I was and in sharing who she was, so that we could have a conversation that lasted, that nourished the both of us. And we were really good friends, actually, like really good friends as I was an adult. And I think that's the thing that I think of the most. Like one of the most memorable gigs I have is with Bullhorn when we did a New Year's show at a Woodford Folk Fest. It was like the New Year's night on the amphitheater stage. I think it ended up being like 20, 30,000 people eventually, but I think it was like 20,000 people in the crowd. And it was the biggest crowd I'd performed in front of. It was a big night. I was seeing someone and she was in the crowd, and there was all these like different ego triggers of like, man, look at this. But it was actually the same. It was the first New Year's that I was there without my mom. And I remember as I walked out to do a sound check and all the rest of the band were off stage, it was just me. And the crowd was just so hyped and ready to go for any act, because I don't know if half of them knew who we were. But it was just this like big roar. And I remember looking out and I was like, man, this is the highest thing I felt. And it's still below a conversation with my mom. Like the level of like the nourishment and the real talk. I'm so lucky to be alive. And it was a beautiful thing. And that was a humbling thing that started at the gig. And then as we went over the gig, I remember reflecting as I sung Resonate Right, and I remember the lessons that she shared with me. And I was like, it's so interesting. Like, these people will never get to meet her physically, but they're still getting to encounter the ideas and the values that she shared. And that's, I think, a kind of beautiful kind of troll to the darkness of the world, that even those who come to do good still keep doing good after they're gone, you know? Like, so yeah, so that was beautiful. And it was a beautiful thing for myself to still be out there performing and to feel like I wasn't conquered by the grief, you know. It was good.
And thanks for sharing, because it's so many gold nuggets between the lines, you know, reading between the lines. There's so much coming in, just bursting through my consciousness as you speak, you know. So much goodness in there as well. Like the importance of that presence, you know, being a present being, a present person, a presence in itself, in people's lives, in loved ones' lives, and giving them that time, giving them that perspective, that giving them you know, that presence. I feel that, and that's why for me as well, a big part of why I feel mindfulness is really up there for me, because of the power that happens when you're really present with someone and you're right here, you're listening, you're 100% there, you're giving them piece of you. This is all freestyle. None of this shit is it's pre-written. We don't know what's going to come out. This is a conversation. So in those moments, that life that comes through, and that can reverberate and resonate for time. It can reverberate for a long time. You know, if you're happy and open to really actually expressing yourself. And you know, you look at anyone that you remember their name, or that you say their name, that we're talking about. I don't know if good or bad, whatever you say. Like even people like I don't know. The good example, I guess, is Hitler. They're fucking. I'm like, good job, man. You put yourself out there. You did some shit that not for real though. I'm like, fuck everyone. Like I can appreciate someone who, like, I don't believe anyone believes they're doing a bad thing. You know, like whatever people are doing, they're doing it because they believe it's the right thing to do. And maybe you got some people way deep on the spectrum that are in maximum security, you know, but even them, there's like who have no idea or just don't give a fuck at all, because there's absolutely nothing there. You know, it's like, yeah. But at the same time, it's like, well, still there's part of the evolutionary drive that is doing something, and they're doing it. And for me, I find that commendable in a way that it's like, well, they're actually putting themselves out there, you know, and they're
showing up in life, even if it's in the most horrendous and like
100%. Yeah. It's like I take optimism to extreme, bro.
Man, this is like a mad tangent, but one of my favorite comedians is Bill Burrs, and he did this piece about like the greatest killers and murderers of all time, and he's like likening it to athletes, because he also is like a sports fan, like Irish, Boston American. He's like, Hitler, he's like, this is 8 million kills, 8 million confirmed kills. This guy's putting up some serious numbers. And it's like, it's one of the best bits of comedy, but it's true in that he's touching on this sense of like the indifference of greatness, like to just be present and to live your best life. But,
living his best life.
Hopefully we have people. Yeah, hopefully we have the good doers living.
But there's power in actually owning those traits within yourself, and not being like get it away from me. It's like, well, if I can be compassionate, if I can be empathic and empathetic, if I can be totally loving and caring, that nothing is black or white. So if you have the capabilities for that, you got the capabilities to be horrific, you got the capability to be terrible, you got the capabilities to be a tyrant, and owning that, I believe, is actually powerful. We don't want to say that we're not as well.
100%. I'm about that, man. Like I like to think I keep a balance with my humor being super dark. And I don't know if you've experienced it with your own kind of journey through grief, but most friends I have who have experienced any kind of serious grief, you come out on the other side of that with a deeply dark sense of humor. Like your shit, and that's the beauty of humor, because it takes things from being a power over your life and it makes it the subject of a joke, you know, like. But
that's hilarious. And I started already pretty dark and dry. So.
yeah, exactly.
You can imagine. You can imagine.
You're that 90% dark chocolate. Just stay on the shelf. Like, it's like. But
I got a few shadows on that dark right now.
Yeah, and I love doing that. Like, people who are at a gig will have already seen this. You might have seen this. Like, if you've seen Bullhorn do a thing in between songs, I'll quickly just be like, "Are y'all feeling good?" And like just quickly just flip that typical hype man experience and just be like, "Oh, well, if you're not, think one day you'll be dead. So this is pretty good by comparison." Duh, 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 duh. Just like keep rolling and just drop in that subtle, like, man, ultimately we're here for a short time. No one knows what's going on. Don't take anything too seriously.
100%.
And obviously that's said with my own share of privilege and disadvantage. So who knows?
With the futurist stuff as well, is this Bullhorn something that you'll be with? Are you guys planning on staying together? Are you guys all having families? And like, what's going on with you guys and what's going on with the future?
It's a bit of both, man. I think Bullhorn, our goal is to go into this year and make an album that we think actually captures the band for what it is. Because our previous studio album didn't do that. And we're just like straight up about that. We're like, it's okay. There's like one song or two that we're like, yeah, that's pretty cool. But mostly it was not fulfilling. And also I think we just have changed so much from that, because that album was in recording as I joined the band. So it kind of went through this whole identity crisis as it was being produced. Anyway, the whole point of Bullhorn at this stage is to get something together in the studio / from our live recordings as well that kind of encapsulates like what the band has been, and for me gets down some of those messages that I just am so what's the word, like I guess so fond of having with Bullhorn as that particular medium. Just getting something that can be a release that stands the it's literally, I don't think we're making it for anyone other than ourselves, but hopefully it's something that people and all the Bullhorn fans who have always said, man, when are you guys going to put out some shit that's like, you know, sounds like you guys, like, it'll be that. And then whatever that leads to, everyone's open to it. But yeah, obviously different guys are having different families, and Bullhorn's always been like a union of players. So it's like anyone can jump in and sub for someone except for me. So until I become Papa Row, it's pretty open book, man. But yeah, I just want to practice on showing up, you know, showing up more, going into the comfort zone, going out of the comfort zone more. So studio written, confronting old trauma from that Christian hip hop album shit, where I'm a little bit weary to put down any ideological stance on the record, and just going in and tripling down, you know. So the future is determined but uncertain.
No doubt, no doubt. Well, go ham with it. And it's been a pleasure. I feel that we can wrap up a little bit now. In terms of, is there anything that you'd like to get across in terms of, I don't know, just final thoughts for today? You know, this can be the beginning of a discussion, because I'm pretty certain that there will be multiple appearances with, a lot of these conversations I'll talk to you. This is pretty much really the first conversation we've had, really.
Yeah.
Like, we've talked a little bit, but, so I look at this as like the beginning, so I'm sure the conversation will continue, but just for now, do you feel there's any last little thoughts you'd like to leave to listeners, or that you'd like to share at all?
The only thing that I can share is where I'm currently at. If anyone, I didn't start this with a plug in mind, but if anyone does end up on my Instagram, RomanMC or roman.is.alive, a lot of the things you'll see between my actual promo and like Instagram-y social media things, I just do this hashtag 50 days of gratitude. And I've had people call me out and be like, isn't it like day 300 by now? Like, what is this 50 days thing? And I just do that because I like trolling any structure or sense of expectation. But gratitude is the thing that I'm sharing. I know it's everywhere. Every hashtag motivation has a hashtag gratitude next to it. But for me, the power of gratitude has shown itself in the last couple of years. And just because we did touch on that real talk and talking about my mom and stuff, I remember there was a couple of weeks before my mum passed away that I was writing a song actually. And I did that. I don't know if you ever had that moment where you're writing something and it's so bang, you have to call up someone or just text the producer and be like, hey, it's coming, baby. Get ready.
No,
like,
hey, get here now.
Yeah,
Listen to this. I'm just going to record on my phone. Listen. You don't really get the idea, but listen.
Totally. I was at my mum's and I was like writing on my laptop and just had this experience where I was like, yo, hey, I know I don't normally like try because she wasn't musically too into the hip hop. We could talk the ideas forever, but not musically. She wasn't. So anyway, it was a rare thing for me to call her in excited and like share a lyric or something like that. But I shared the song that I had about gratitude. And I remember thinking like, man, it's an amazing thing just to exist and experience anything from the best, most advantaged life to the most disadvantaged, even most suffering filled life. The actual odds of existing in the one spot of the known universe where you can breathe and not burn instantly, like that's insane. And I remember saying that with a sense of privilege, like I was aware of my own privilege at that point. So I was like, I don't know if this is something that's like based on my very lucky first generation migrant in Australia kind of experience. And I was talking to her about it. And I remember saying it was very strange timing because my mom passed away pretty suddenly. So in this chat, I said, I guess even on my worst day, which I guess would be the day that you pass away or something, it would still be amazing to be alive. And it was one of those, like, it's kind of like that freaky timing shit where life goes, careful what you wish for. And 2 weeks after that, on the night that it was all happening and mum had passed, and it was just like a very dark, very traumatic, potentially traumatic time in life. I was outside of the hospital underneath the stars and I was thinking of who to call and like going through that moment where you're like, I'm about to get fucked up emotionally and psychologically. Like, this is going to be a real bad memory. And this is the worst day of my life. Like this moment is the worst I've ever experienced emotionally. It was just crazy. And amidst the tidal wave that was bearing down on me, this little sense of something said, let's look up. And I looked up at the stars and I went, oh, it is still amazing to be alive. It is true. That is true. This isn't like Christianity where it was only for a certain season that it kind of applied. And then if things got tough, I would let it go or whatever. This is what I think is the closest thing to a truth that I've found. So for that reason, I want to say gratitude by my experience is the most powerful thing that will absolutely save you when it's like the darkest day. And that's me sharing that with you. It's me sharing that with anyone who hears it. Even if it's something years from now, they'll remember listening to this podcast or whatever and be like, what was that thing about when that guy was about to die or something? And he looked at it. Yeah, gratitude. Gratitude has been like the number one thing in the realest way. It's changed my life. And it's really made me a different person in the last couple of years. So that's the only thing I thought to share on a real talk level. Man. How about yourself?
For me, I would have to agree, but because it's kind of that has just opened. I'm about to release a book that I've been wanting to release. It's the Dream Life Journal. It's essentially a gratitude journal. It's a practical way to bring all the concepts that I've discovered over the journey since year 2000. And that have helped me and the many people, the thousands of people I've worked with and the millions of people who have been affected because of that. And it's the condensation of all of that into one page. I'm like, because I'm forever streamlining and stripping back. And I'm like, what's the core principles? I love that when we speak and I ask you a question, you often will respond with the principle. You know, that for me is applicable anywhere. You know, if we teach techniques, it's like, yeah, I can use that. But if I teach a principle, you can apply it in so many different ways. So, but then coming back of like, how can I get those principles into practical actions that are techniques or tools that we can use that are super powerful, have neuroscientific backing, have universal laws that ingrained, embedded in them. And for me, I've got all of that and I've put it into one page. And a lot of it's beginning with what do I want? What's my intention? Where's my attention going? What am I grateful for? It's like the beginning of it. And then it's just like a recap and celebrating your wins. It's all of this in one page. So for me, it's having gratitude is the core of it and knowing what you want. So those are two things. It's like asking yourself the question, what do I want? What would I like to create? Because oftentimes it's come back to that listening. It's like often I don't know what I want. I just have to shut up and listen, and then I'll be told what I want. Not by anyone else, but by something that's come from within or from beyond, or it might be God, or whatever you want to call it, you know?
That's it. That's it. Man, when's that? When's that coming out? Not to
Next month. So this podcast, I don't know the exact release date of it, but it will be released, either would have just been released, depends on the release date of this, or will just about to be.
Yeah, fair play. Awesome, man.
So very soon.
I look forward to it, bro. I look forward to it a lot.
Yeah, man. It's a practical way to actually bring these concepts into the earth. Because for me, yeah, concepts are great. It's like, but yeah, it's like the wisdom. It's like knowledge isn't wisdom till applied, you know? So this is the application piece.
Actionable advice is one of the most rarest things to find now. All these business entrepreneurs and people just be about it. Like, okay, what do I do? 100%. Oh, man.
No doubt, man. I appreciate you. It's been a pleasure getting to know you, and I look forward to more conversations, both recorded and non.
Absolutely, brother. Hey, and happy birthday, man. Enjoy. Thank you for making time. I appreciate that.
Man, we couldn't think of anywhere better to be. Seriously, man.
Cheers, bro. Awesome. All right. Well, peace out till next time. Hey, much love.
Bless up, and until next time, fam, keep the flow growing and the growth flowing.